On July 2nd, 1951, Mary Risa, a 67-year-old woman, was found burned to death in her house after her landlady realised that the house's doorknob was extremely hot. The landlady notified the police, and upon entering the home, they found Risa's remains completely burned into ash, with only one leg remaining. The chair she was sitting in was also destroyed. During the investigation, detectives found that Risa's temperature was around 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit, which puzzled investigators due to such hot temperatures leaving almost all the room Risa was in intact. Of all the tragic and horrific fates that can befall a person with regards to the paranormal, one that sends shivers through most people is that of spontaneous human combustion. Spontaneous human combustion is a rare event indeed, yet when the event occurs, the results are visible, visceral and terrifying. For some unknown reason, the victim bursts into flames unannounced. The heat is intense and aggressive, reducing the victim to ashes in what seems to be a short space of time. Rarely is there a survivor of such an event. Spontaneous human combustion is, believe it or not, an old known phenomenon, and in fact had been referenced in various publications historically. The most notable being Charles Dickens's Bleak House, where he mentions the demise of a victim, the so-called Mr. Crook, who was a known alcoholic. Bizarre as it seems, modern-day science is yet to provide an answer to such events. There have been studies within the forensic field to try and replicate the effects of spontaneous human combustion on cadavers and suitable animal bodies, yet, although experiments can produce somewhat remarkable results, to date, science still has fallen short of matching the characteristics of this phenomenon, at least in the eyes of witnesses on the scene. Indeed, the source of many of these combustion events have been established in much of the recorded cases. Also, it's believed, especially in cases dating back a few hundred years, sources such as the obvious lit candle and other open fire were omitted for reports, adding to much of the mystery. Believe it or not, the human body is hard to burn into ashes without an accelerant. Most unfortunate victims of domestic fires are found by the fire rescue teams, usually on the floor or in some corner of a room. But there is enough of their remains to identify the victim, especially by dental records. Rarely do such fires produce enough heat to disintegrate the human body to ash. The most common way our bodies will be reduced to ash is in the incinerator of the local crematorium. However, as one would guess, there is a counter-argument to this. Where the destruction of the victim is extensive, additional fuel sources were involved, such as chair stuffing, floor coverings, the flooring itself, and the like. The investigators described how such materials helped retain melted fat to burn and destroy more of the body, yielding still more liquefied fat in a cyclic process known as the wick effect or the candle effect. But let us not get too far ahead of ourselves. Regardless of determining the source for the ignition, it remains hard to explain why the fire was contained or localized to the victim's vicinity. Spontaneous human combustion fires are believed to start within the body of the victim. This idea and the term spontaneous human combustion were first both proposed in 1746 by Paul Rowley in an article published in the Philosophical Transactions. Writing in the British Medical Journal in 1938, coroner Gavin Thurston described the phenomenon as having attracted the attention not only of the medical profession but of the laity as early as 1834, more than 100 years prior to Thurston's article. In his 1995 book Ablaze, Larry E. Arnold wrote that there had been about 200 cited reports of spontaneous human combustion worldwide over a period of around 300 years. Based on this, the more curious amongst us could ask, why have there not been more, especially as alcohol has been with humanity for quite some time. In addition, open flames were quite common in virtually every part of the world. As if to put a cold case stamp on this phenomenon, in the British Medical Journal in 1938, in an article by L.A. Parry, some commonalities among recorded cases of spontaneous human combustion were presented. The victims are chronic alcoholics. They are usually elderly females. The body has not burnt spontaneously, but some lighted substances has met it. The hands and feet usually fall off. The fire has caused very little damage to combustible things in contact with the body. The combustion of the body has left a residue or greasy and fetid ashes, very offensive in odour. So, what are we to make of the peculiar event of spontaneous human combustion? Many years ago, when I was younger, it almost scared me to death. For just the thought of you sitting there having a meal, watching your television, and suddenly to burst into ferocious flames. However, science again has highlighted some elements of significance that possibly were overlooked during the initial investigations. Sometimes, not intentionally, as going back 100 years or so, our scientific reasoning was not as mature as it is today, and people were more prone to jump to superstition to explain events that were quite puzzling. Well, before we close the case on spontaneous human combustion and place our faith in the hands of science, we need to take a moment's rest before jumping in. Scientists will have you believe they have the answer to everything. Indeed, when they do not, they will not print it. Frequently, they will find anything else to explain the event away, regardless of if their assumption is scientifically sound. Therefore, let me relate one more incident to you, one occurring in more recent times, with recent medical and forensic advances, and yet did not arrive at the conclusion expected. On December 2010, the death of Michael Faherty in County Galway, Ireland, was recorded as spontaneous combustion by the coroner. The doctor, Karen McLaughlin, made this statement at the inquiry into his death, quote, "This fire was thoroughly investigated and I'm left with the conclusion that this fits into the category of spontaneous human combustion, for which there is no adequate explanation." Sleep tight.